Good evening, I'm Raghavi and welcome to the Above the Fold show. We begin with an analysis of the Assembly election exit polls and a quick look at the West Bengal elections phase 2. We also look at what the UAE leaving OPEC could mean, Rahul Gandhi's accusations over the Great Nicobar project, updates on King Charles's visit to the US and more. So stay with us for the full report. The much anticipated exit polls for the assembly elections in Assam, Kerala, Puducherry, Tamil Nadu and West Bengal are now out, offering an early sense of the electoral verdict. In Assam, Axis My India and JVC project the BJP-led NDA returning to power with a clear majority. In West Bengal, where phase 2 polling has just concluded, projections from Chanakya Strategies and Matterize indicate an advantage for the BJP. In Tamil Nadu, exit polls suggest the incumbent MK Stalin-led DMK alliance is set to retain power with a majority. Pollsters including People Pulse, Matterize and PMark broadly place the DMK alliance ahead, with the AIADMK alliance behind and Vijay's Tamizhaga Vetri Kadagam expected to have a limited presence. In Kerala, exit polls point to a close contest with a slight edge for the Congress-led UDF. Pollsters Axis My India, People's Pulse and Matterize broadly indicate the UDF ahead, with the ruling LDF trailing, while the NDA is expected to have a minimal presence. In Puducherry, exit polls indicate a clear advantage for the NDA. Axis My India projects the alliance to secure a majority, with the DMK Congress campaign trailing, while the TVK is expected to have a limited presence in the assembly. Now, while these projections offer a snapshot based on post-voting surveys, the final mandate will only be known on results day. Counting of votes for all 5 assemblies will take place on May 4th. The second phase of polling in West Bengal has ended amid sporadic violence. This round is being seen as a litmus test for the Trinamool Congress, with voting held in its traditional strongholds of South Bengal and Kolkata. Here are the latest updates.
Amid elaborate security arrangements, polling for the second and final phase of the West Bengal Assembly elections was held today. Voting took place for 142 assembly seats across 7 districts, including Kolkata. More than 3.21 crore voters were eligible to decide the fate of 1,448 candidates. The constituencies were spread across North and South 24 Parganas, Nadia, Howrah, Hooghly, Purba Bardhaman and Kolkata, districts that together form the political and electoral heart of the state. This phase was widely seen as a decisive battle, with the contest shifting to the Trinamool Congress's traditional strongholds in South Bengal. The biggest spotlight remained on Bhawanipur, where Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee contested against leader of the opposition Suvendu Adhikari, with CPM candidate Sriji Biswas also in the fray. Nearly 2,400 companies of Central Armed Police Forces were deployed to maintain peace and ensure voter security. Additional surveillance was put in place in sensitive areas, with NIA officials deployed in at least 7 constituencies after the Election Commission sought measures to prevent bombs from being used to disrupt polling. Voters queued up from early morning outside booths across Kolkata, Howrah and adjoining districts. West Bengal recorded 90% voter turnout till 5 pm, with Purva Bardhaman leading at 92.46% according to the Election Commission. The day, however, saw sporadic violence and tension.
सब कर रहा है, इसलिए तो आया है।
कौन लोग हैं जो आपको देख के सांस लेने लग रहे? कौन लोग हैं
आप देख लीजिए, मुसलमान है।
Incidents were reported from Chapra, Shantipur, Nimtala and Bhangar. Visuals emerged of reported clashes at booth number 120 in North 24 Parganas. Clashes were also reported between BJP and TMC polling agents at booths in Khanakul, though polling later resumed peacefully. In Bhawanipur, chaos broke out outside a polling booth, prompting police to use a lathi charge to disperse rival supporters. The BJP alleged that its party symbols on some EVMs were covered with tape or ink at certain booths. Following the complaint, Chief Electoral Officer Manoj Agarwal said repolling could be ordered in booths where any tampering with machines was confirmed. In Panihatti, BJP candidate Ratna Debnath, mother of the Arjikar rape murder victim, faced protests by TMC workers after allegations of influencing voters. Political exchanges continued throughout the day. Mamata Banerjee accused the BJP of trying to rig the polls, alleging central forces and election observers were acting at the ruling party's behest. She also claimed her workers and polling agents were being intimidated. Suvendu Adhikari said the BJP would form the next government with a massive majority. Prime Minister Narendra Modi thanked voters for the strong turnout and said people were voting in a fearless atmosphere unseen in decades. TMC MP Derek O'Brien challenged Modi to resign if the ruling party retained power. Mahua Moitra described the election as a fight to save democracy, while Congress President Mallikarjun Kharge urged voters to defend their rights through the ballot. With polling now over, the focus shifts to May 4th, when West Bengal will know who forms its next government.
The United Arab Emirates has announced its withdrawal from OPEC, removing a core pillar of one of the most influential groups in the energy world. But what does this mean for India? Let's find out.
The United Arab Emirates has announced it will exit the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and the wider OPEC Plus alliance effective May 1. The UAE, one of the OPEC's top 3 producers, said the decision reflects its long-term strategic and economic vision and the need for greater flexibility to respond to evolving energy demands. The decision comes amid heightened tensions in West Asia with disruptions of oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz. Founded in 1960, OPEC has long coordinated oil production among major producers like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, and Iran to influence global supply and prices. In 2016, the group expanded into OPEC Plus by bringing in non-OPEC producers such as Russia, extending its control over nearly half of global output. However, strains within the alliance have been visible for years. Qatar exited in 2019, while countries like Angola and Ecuador have also stepped away, citing similar concerns over quotas and strategic priorities. Analysts say the UAE's departure is more significant. The country has invested heavily to expand its production capacity and has repeatedly expressed frustration over output limits based on older baselines. The move now allows Abu Dhabi to ramp up production without cartel constraints, while also aligning with its broader strategy to diversify into sectors like renewables, technology, and finance. Beyond economics, the exit also hints at subtle geopolitical divergence within OPEC, particularly with Saudi Arabia.
And now, to give us more insight into what this could mean for India and its ties with the UAE, we are joined by Kalyanaraman M, Associate Editor at The Hindu.
The UAE leaving the OPEC may well signify that the Strait of Hormuz crisis is ending soon. That may be the UAE's reading of the situation. That means business as usual, ships flowing across the Strait of Hormuz carrying oil. And what the UAE is going to do next, now that it has left and it no more has to conform to quotas defined by dictated by Saudi Arabia, is that it may crank up oil production. So the end result of this decision may well be lower oil prices, which are now 50% of what they were before the war, and that's good news for India. The second thing is that the UAE has been more advanced than even Saudi Arabia in paying for its oil trade in yuan. Leaving the OPEC may well signify that the UAE wants to be more flexible in the sort of currencies it wants to deal with, and that's another piece of good news for India, because the UAE has had long, very good relationships with India historically and recently as well, the large diaspora population. So that comfort factor is there, and India can probably source a little more oil from the UAE. The comfort factor and the familiarity with UAE crude in Indian refineries may well play into all this. So overall, good news for India.
Now let's take a quick look at the other major headlines of the day. Up first, the spacecraft that carried 4 astronauts around the moon is back where its record-breaking journey began. NASA's Artemis II capsule has returned to Florida's Kennedy Space Center nearly a month after blasting off on humanity's first lunar trip in more than a half-century. After splashing down in the Pacific on April 10, the Orion capsule was transported from San Diego to Cape Canaveral. Engineers will now examine its heat shield and overall performance as they prepare for next year's Artemis III mission. The capsule, named Integrity by its US Canadian crew, flew 4 astronauts, Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, deeper into space than humans have ever traveled before. The Artemis program, which follows a long gap since Apollo 17 in 1972, now moves toward Artemis III, featuring a new capsule and crew, docking tests in the Earth orbit, and paving the way for a moon landing as early as 2028. Up next, a major political development from South Korea. A Seoul High Court has sentenced former President Yoon to 7 years in prison for obstructing investigators during an arrest attempt. The case stems from his controversial 2024 martial law declaration, during which he was found to have used presidential security personnel to block the execution of an arrest warrant. The appeals court upheld key findings of the lower court, calling his actions highly reprehensible and a misuse of state power. It also confirmed his conviction for abuse of power linked to the planning of the martial law move. Both Yoon and prosecutors had challenged the earlier ruling, with prosecution seeking a harsher sentence. Yoon, who showed little emotion in court, is already serving a life sentence in a separate case related to insurrection over the same martial law attempt. His legal team has said they will now move to the Supreme Court of Korea on appeal. Moving on, Congress leader Rahul Gandhi has sharply criticized the proposed Great Nicobar project, calling it a threat to the environment and local communities. In a social media post, Gandhi described the project at Campbell Bay in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands as one of the biggest scams, largest thefts of ecological property that has taken place in the country, and a grave crime against the country's natural and tribal heritage. He said the project would involve cutting millions of trees across a vast stretch of rainforest, calling it destruction dressed in development's language. Gandhi, who is currently visiting Great Nicobar, said the island residents are being deprived of what is rightfully theirs. The centre, however, has defended the 81,000 crore project. In other news, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has inaugurated the 594-kilometer long Ganga Expressway in Uttar Pradesh, a mega corridor linking Meerut to Prayagraj. Built as one of the country's longest expressways, the high-speed corridor is expected to boost connectivity, cut travel time, and drive industrial growth, logistics, and agricultural trade across the state. The 6-lane expressway, expandable to 8, will link 12 districts and is designed for speeds up to 120 km per hour, with features like an emergency airstrip, intelligent traffic systems, and integrated logistics hubs along the route. Focus shifts back to Odisha, where Jitu Munda, who was seen carrying his sister's skeletal remains, has now received the money. The incident sparked nationwide outrage after Munda approached a bank to withdraw savings from his deceased sister's account, but was informed that death certificate and legal heirship documents were mandatory. Unable to understand or arrange the paperwork, he exhumed his sister's remains, placed them in a sack, and walked nearly 2.5 kilometers to the bank, presenting them as a proof of her death. Following this, the officials, in an unusual alacrity, moved swiftly, issuing the death certificate, verifying legal heirs, and completing documentation within hours. The amount was later handed over to 3 legal heirs, including Munda, at his residence on April 28. In a statement, Indian Overseas Bank said due process was followed and denied any harassment, attributing the incident to lack of awareness of claim procedures. The district administration also initiated a probe into the circumstances that forced Munda to carry the skeletal remains in full public view. Let's now turn to the Hindu Roundup for some of our exclusive content. In an editorial titled "A False High on Voter Turnout Data SAR Impact," the piece argues that headline figures in Tamil Nadu and West Bengal should be read with caution. It says SAR's impact must be factored in before reading turnout figures, as revisions to electoral rolls sharply reduce the number of registered voters. The editorial notes that Provisional Election Commission data showed record participation in both states. However, it says the special intensive revision led to a major voter deletions, meaning the high percentages may reflect a small electorate rather than a real surge in voting. The piece adds that polling percentages alone do not indicate democratic enthusiasm or predict outcomes, and it must be assessed alongside how the voter rolls were prepared before conclusions are drawn. Tap the card above to watch the editorial on the Hindu Originals YouTube channel. In his article, "A Recusal Test the Delhi High Court Failed" for the Hindu, Supreme Court lawyer Kalishwaram Raj argues that Justice Swarnakanta Sharma should have recused herself from hearing the Delhi liquor policy case involving Arvind Kejriwal. He says the refusal departs from established principles on judicial recusal. He notes that Kejriwal cited earlier adverse observations by the judge, her attendance at events organized by the ABVP, and professional links of her children with the government side. Raj says these were enough to create a reasonable apprehension of bias. The article argues that the judgment relied on a subjective defense of imperiality instead of an objective legal test. Raj warns that the ruling could become an embarrassing precedent for the judiciary. And finally, King Charles III addressed the US Congress, highlighting historic ties even as tensions test the transatlantic relationship. Here's the gist.
King Charles III has delivered a landmark address to the US Congress highlighting the enduring ties between the UK and the US. Marking 250 years of American independence from the Britain, the King said the destinies of the two countries remain interlinked while acknowledging what he described as times of great uncertainty. His speech comes amid growing tensions between President Donald Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, particularly over the ongoing conflict in Iran and differing approaches to the global alliances. Without directly naming either leader, King Charles struck a careful diplomatic tone urging unity and calling for unyielding resolve in supporting Ukraine while also reaffirming the importance of NATO. He also addressed recent political violence, declaring that such acts would never succeed, while emphasizing the need to uphold shared democratic values. At the same time, there were subtle signals of concerns over divisions between the two allies, including differences over trade and foreign policy priorities. The King briefly also lightened the mood with a touch of humor during his remarks.
Indeed, you recently commented, Mr. President, that if it were not for the United States, European countries would be speaking German. Dare I say that if it wasn't for us, you'd be speaking French.
Earlier in the day, he met President Trump at White House, where both leaders publicly emphasized the long-standing partnership between their countries. President Trump described the meeting as really good and called King a fantastic person. Behind the scenes, however, the relationship between both the countries remained under pressure, from tariff disputes to wider questions about the future of the transatlantic cooperation. King Charles and Queen Camilla arrived in Washington on April 27 and will continue their US visit later this week, with stops in New York City and Virginia.
To get more insight on what the visit means, we are joined by our foreign correspondent Sriram Lakshman. Over to you.
The visit of King Charles is significant as it comes at a time when the Anglo-American relationship is under considerable strain over Britain's refusal to join the US in striking Iran. The relationship between British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and US President Donald Trump, once characterized by bonhomie, has come under significant strain, with Mr. Trump frequently criticizing the British Prime Minister. So this is the context of the royal visit to the US, and it is reflected in both the speeches of King Charles. The King not only talked about the shared history of the two countries and the special relationship, he also acknowledged that there were differences between the two countries. The King got a standing ovation, including from the Democrats, when he pointed out that the Magna Carta, the 13th century English document limiting the power of the King, had been cited at least 160 times in US Supreme Court cases as a foundation of the principle that executive power is subject to checks and balances. The British government, which decides or signs off on the King's official program abroad, has often used the royal family to exercise soft power. And this is a classic case in point.
And that's it for today. Thank you for watching. Please share your thoughts on today's episode in the comment section. If you found this video useful, don't forget to share it and save the Above the Fold playlist so you never miss an update.